I just prepared a few words. When I do this, I write about 40 speeches and then I decide which one to give. And I wanted you to know that this morning has been so phenomenal with staff, with tomorrow's leaders, with Grampians, with everything that's been done. I've changed it even in the last few minutes to talk about things. But the first group of people I want to address are the people who are appearing, who are listening remotely. And I want to specifically talk about this. You are an essential part of our organization. We desperately need you, and we work every single year in order to make your participation better. I will have to give a shout out to KC and to the Adult Advisory Council, because adults with CF know more about remote participation in events than anybody else, and we continue to learn from them. So it will always be our primary endeavor to make certain that you are included. We hope that you have enjoyed this year. If there are comments, please let us know. Now then, for all of you here, I want you to know that showing off Denver and Rockies and the Rocky Mountains to the Foundation and VLC is exceeded only by the pride that I feel in showing off the Foundation and VLC to the Rocky Mountain West. It's the entire purpose that we did this, and I will be talking about the shift, the change, the new phase 3 that I call it, that Molly and I began to do around 2015 in order to shift the entire volunteer concept in order to meet the challenges that we are going to confront in the new era after we've discovered the modulators, and now we're all of a sudden moving into mRNA therapy and all the other things, and we will need to completely recharge, and that is what we're doing. And one of the first things we did is that we alternated from being in Washington, D.C. to bringing VLC out into the countryside. So the first year we did it in Dallas, and then we went back to Washington, and then we went to San Diego, and then we were beset by COVID, and we were in a mess for a long time, and then we went back to Washington, D.C., and now we are out here, and it's fascinating. And it's also a lesson that having come all the way to Colorado, that the one board of directors of a chapter that has appeared 100% in person or online, and primarily in person, is the Washington, D.C. chapter. So would you all stand up? It's just stunning to me. But I want to talk to you about the evolution of the foundation. I'm actually going to be talking about some of our history today, because I want the new attendees to understand how we got to where we are. Because it's not just a genetic defect that's in our DNA. It's also something with regard to participation in solving problems. And we have been totally unique. And in order to do that, I'm going to talk about phase 1. And phase 1, I'll tell you right now, is going to be around the first 25 years. It's from 1955 to 1980. 1980 is important because that's the advent of Bob Bell. And Bob then brings in Preston Campbell, who you'll hear from later on. And so that second period is from Bob Bell's entry in 1980 until around 2015, when all of a sudden the modulators are now coming in and having a huge impact, and we are now positioning ourselves for stage 3. And that's the critical point, and those are the changes we have begun to make, and those we have begun. I haven't done anything. I said last year, my motto is, look, there go the entire, all of the committees. I am their leader. I must follow them. And that's all I do. And that is all I do. But I want to talk to you about this in the context of the history of the foundation, because there are some truly remarkable people. And incidentally, a prophet is never extolled in his own land. I know I'm in Colorado, and so you don't believe me, so I'm going to have to go to authorities. And I've got it. It's Vigil Trivedi's book, Breath from Salt. All right, now I'm going to read this 558 pages during lunch. No, I don't have to go further than the title to show you what you need to understand. I'm going to read that title, Breath from Salt, A Deadly Genetic Disease, A New Era in Science, and the Patients and Families Who Changed Medicine Forever. Did you get it? Did you see what it was? They didn't say the doctors. They didn't say the researchers. And God knows they didn't say the drug companies. They said the patients and families who changed medicine forever. That's you. You have changed medicine forever. I know you don't believe me right now, but I want to explain that in the history of the context of the history of this foundation and what the parents and what the families have done to change the world. And incidentally, I really want to emphasize this. It doesn't make any difference how successful the foundation becomes, how large, how sophisticated, how wealthy. It makes no difference. You are the foundation. Yes, I know the foundation is composed of doctors and nurses and researchers and lab technicians and, God love them, attorneys and accountants. But they augment you. They do not diminish you in any way, and they certainly do not displace you. It is you. Now then, let's start from a deadly disease, right? A deadly genetic disease. Well, 1938, Dorothy Anderson discovers it, and how does she discover it? She discovers it by doing autopsies on deceased infants. This is a disease that has been around for centuries. It's discovered by doing autopsies on deceased infants. You don't get more deadly than that. You're starting from level 0. It's incredible what then occurred. And I know that there's a natural reaction of, well, it'll be some great doctors, and there were some great doctors. I mean, Dorothy Anderson and Paul de Saint-Agnès and Harry Schwachman were 3 that went on the board of visitors immediately, the medical advisory committee for the foundation in 1955. They did. But you know, just take those 3 people. You already have what was in effect for most of us during the time that our children were born and as they grew up prior to modulators. They knew how to diagnose the disease. They knew the need for digestive enzymes. They knew the need for antibiotics. Dr. de Saint-Agnès went to the War Production Board and got some vials of penicillin in order to use them and discover the benefit of antibiotics and the need for chest therapy. That was it. That was it. You gave them the Creon or the pancrease with the applesauce. You gave them antibiotics as they were discovered in a tune-up at the hospital once or twice or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 times a year, and you beat on their chest to show them that you loved them. And yet, even with those things that we already knew at the time, the average lifespan for a child with cystic fibrosis was 3 years of age. Until there was a foundation. I could talk, and I would, Dee Dee Sharples and Doris Tolson, but I want to talk about Evelyn Graub, just for 1 second. She was a mother who stationed outside of Dr. de Saint-Agnès' waiting room. And she was the mother of 2 children with CF. And imagine yourselves doing this. Ask yourselves if you would do what she did. She would buttonhole the parents as they came to the clinic or they came out of the clinic, and she would say, I know your child is probably going to die, and my 2 children are probably going to die before it's going to make any difference, but would you join with me in order to try to start an organization that could make a difference in children's lives? You know what that's like. You know what it's like to all of a sudden say, I'm going to confront that loss, and then I'm going to get as far away from this as I possibly can. And she sat there over and over and over for years at a time, talking to other parents and saying, would you join with me? And they did. And they did. And then think about this. They all of a sudden get together. Doris Tolson, working out of the basement of her place in Scarsdale, New York. They all of a sudden get together and they decide they're going to create a foundation, and they decide they're going to model it on the Infantile Paralysis Foundation, the National Foundation for Infant. That's polio. And they're going to have care centers, and they're going to have a registry, and they're going to do all the things necessary in order to make certain that there are best practices so people will survive. And they do. And they start this, the CF clinic is all of a sudden funded, and what happens is they begin to do the things that make a huge, huge difference, and that is identify right away, as quickly as you can, get a diagnosis, and then act as quickly as possible with a multidisciplinary care team and a comprehensive treatment program. And do you know what happened? In Cleveland, all of a sudden, the average age was 20 years old. It was three years old in other locations, and they were saying, hogwash, we don't believe you. We can't accept that. You've got to be doctoring the numbers. So they ended up having to hire a professional mathematician to come in and actually do the comparison. And what they found is that what the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation had placed into effect made a difference to children's lives. And that's phase one. Isn't that incredible? I just want to talk to you about, all right, the hubris, the courage, the chutzpah to all of a sudden have a little bitty orphan disease and say, I think I'll model it after polio. You know, Roosevelt had polio. Who do I know that had cystic fibrosis? Well, no one, because they didn't live that long. But let's go ahead and have care centers. Let's go ahead and have a registry. Let's go ahead and compile the data. Can you imagine what it took for parents to all of a sudden have that kind of vision and anticipate where they were going in the future? And where they were going was to dream big. Phase two, Doris Tolson and Bob Dressing, parents all of a sudden decide that what they're going to do is they're going to centralize everything, because we've got to get research going in order to make a difference. In order to get Bob Bell to be willing to come, they've got to show the determination to buy in and to centralize everything. Now then, this is where I have a little bit of fun. There were 47 board members at the time. Bunch of regional board members, bunch of national board members. It was a disparate group of people. It was very hard to govern. Frank DeFord said to me one time that in between board members, it was a rarity. It was a rare time period that one of the children of the board members didn't pass away. In one interval between board members, a board member lost both of their children within the same time frame. Again, think about what it must have been like during that time period, and then think what it must have been like for someone to say, I understand how important these CF centers are. I understand how you want to take some of the money each year and you want to keep it with your locale. I understand that you're worried about your own child, but I've got to tell you, if we're ever going to make progress, we've got to centralize everything. We've got to bring it into a new location, which is going to be Bethesda, Maryland. And what we're going to do is we're going to dissolve the entire foundation. And if you want to go your own way, go your own way. But if you want to be with us, you will be part of one national organization. The money will come into us. We will organize where that money is going to go. We will determine what studies are going to be funded. We will determine what research is going to be done. It is going to be centralized. And now think of yourself as a parent, and you're out there in the hinterlands with a clinic with a child with cystic fibrosis, and you vote yes. What kind of courage must it have taken to do that? It's hard for me to joke about the fact that the deposed board members, as a result of that vote, formed the Leadership Council. They didn't know what the heck to do with them, so they created the Volunteer Leadership Council. And they gave him applause every time, and they asked him to sit down, and they asked him to go back and work in great strides. Now, I know this personally because I'm going to tell you about my induction into the Leadership Council. It happened in 2011. Got a phone call from somebody in the foundation. They said, "Hey, Mike, how are you doing?" I said, "Fine." They said, "Yeah, how's Piper doing?" I said, "Piper's doing great." "Well, how's she doing after the transplant?" She had just had a transplant in 2010. This is 2011. I said, "I think she's doing just fine. Thank you very much for asking." "Why do you ask?" And they said, "Well, her blog, A Matter of Life and Breath, has been incredibly significant. Doctors are even reading it as part of the transplant training program. It has made a huge, huge difference, and we'd really like to give Piper the Alex Award." I was markedly impressed. I said, "Of course. Well, I appreciate that. Oh, I appreciate the phone call." And they said, "Well, we're not just calling to let you know." I said, "Well, what is it that I can do?" And they said, "Well, we didn't have infection control at that time, so people with cystic fibrosis could come to VLC, and they regularly did. And they said, we need an excuse for you to bring Piper." And I said, "And what do you have in mind?" And they said, "Well, we were thinking about making you a member of the Leadership Council." That's a true story. That's how I became a part of the Leadership Council. I've been riding on her coattails from the very, very beginning. I don't know. It just had to take an incredible amount of courage to think about that, and then to think about what we did as we all of a sudden moved into this new phase 2. It was hugely significant. I don't really know exactly how I can describe it, but I can tell you this. Think about yourselves again as a family, because your predecessors did this. Your predecessors did this. They obligated themselves to pay money that they didn't have to screen thousands of chemical compounds using conveyor belts and roller systems that were borrowed from the food industry. You didn't know that, did you? Did you? Rollers designed to move cookies down an assembly line were adapted to move plates of cells so that they could do the high throughput screening that ultimately resulted in Kalydeco, Orkambi, and Trikafta. Imagine that. Isn't that fantastic? But wait, there's more. If you order now, you will get 2 ShamWows for the price of 1. Always wanted to say that. No, just ignore the technology for 1 minute. Just put it aside. I know that's what we love to talk about because what do? It all of a sudden raises this idea of Keebler chocolate chips moving down the assembly line with rat cells of cystic fibrosis. But no, what I want you to understand is that no one had ever found a drug that could refold a damaged protein before. I'm not talking about that using that method. I'm talking about no one had ever done it before. It's impressive, right? No, that's not impressive. No one had ever tried to do it before. We tried, and we did it using a technology that was incredibly novel and a new approach, and that was phase 2, and that has led us to where we are today. And yes, I know we got $20 million from the Bill Gates Foundation. And yes, I know that Joe O'Donnell led us on milestones 1 and milestones 2 in order to get there, and that Preston, it was generally Bob, but sometimes Preston would call out and say, I need another 25 million. I need another 50 million. I need another 25 million just because. And each time, Joe would do it. And I understand how important that was, but you know what you all don't remember is that in order to determine how much was necessary in milestones 1 and milestones 2, they sat down at the very beginning and they said, how much are we going to be able to raise from our chapters on an annual basis so that we know that that's our base load? You were critical to that process. It could not have been done without your great strides and your hiking and your climbing and your biking and your surfing and your fishing and your skiing and your running and your golfing and your eating and drinking, which you do better than anybody in the entire world. And yes, Jerry, I forgot the verb kicking because you did. You got $100,000. From $2,000 you were given by CarMax to go start an event, and you've raised $100,000 a year with your kickball tournament. That's a hell of a thing to do. And that's the point I'm trying to make as we enter into phase 3. And incidentally, don't think your passion event or Jerry's passion event doesn't count. Joe O'Donnell does a hot dog safari every year. You paid $20 and you had all the hot dogs you could eat. And that was an event that he was doing in addition to all the other work. So yes, what you do matters, and the events that you put on are critical to the success of this foundation. Can I just step back for a second and talk to you? Most of us in this room are just genetic draftees into an army we didn't want to join, fighting a fight we didn't want to fight, against a disease that takes pride in being hard to pronounce. Frank DeFord described it this way. It's like one of those soccer players who kicks a football from the side of his foot and has been drafted by the Kansas City Chiefs. Yeah, there's our Kansas group. Coming in now for the extra point try is number 9, cystic fibrosis. And let me tell you about my enlistment into the Army. At 6 weeks of age, Piper had failed to regain her birth weight and was admitted to Memorial Hospital in Colorado Springs. She was diagnosed with pneumonia and spinal meningitis. She stopped breathing as they did the spinal tap in order to ascertain what she had. Into our room came a little 7 or 8 year old girl dragging an oxygen tank behind her, and she asked what was wrong with our baby, and we said, well, she's very, very sick. We don't know yet. Why are you in the hospital? And she said, I have cystic fibrosis. I went home that night in order to stay with our eldest daughter, Erin, and Kathleen and I had a telephone call that night. And I said to her, honey, I know Piper's sick, but thank God she doesn't have cystic fibrosis. That little girl has a death warrant. Shortly thereafter, we got the diagnosis. At the time, I said to myself, well, God seems to always have a custard pie up his sleeve. We went home. We received some caring love from our next door neighbor. They had a healthy, happy daughter 3 months older than Piper. We thought. She was certainly happy. she wasn't healthy. A few months later, she was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis. That was sort of devastating until we learned that Debbie Pelican was pregnant with another child, and as soon as that child was born and tested, Libby Pelican had cystic fibrosis. 3 children, next-door neighbors, all with CF. At that point, I looked up and said, I don't need any more, God. I got the message. I understand what we are supposed to do. We had made the decision we were going to fight for our family, for Piper. What we suddenly understood was that our family was larger than just Piper. It included Sam and Libby. And as we joined in activities in the Rocky Mountain chapter, we met other children and other parents. And as we went to CF Ski, we met other children and other parents. And suddenly we realized, as I hope you have realized over these last 2 days, that our family is much, much larger than the ballroom of the Gaylord of the Rockies. So I hope that you will now understand why we did what we did. Starting in 2015, we began to move away from the phase 2 model, which was to centralize everything in Bethesda and allow us all of a sudden the opportunity to create Grampians and tomorrow's leaders and individual giving committees and peer-to-peer activities and volunteer engagement and corporate engagement and 10 different committees. And these do not supplement, they do not displace in any way the critical importance of the chapters. The chapters must still do what they're doing. What we're trying to do is position ourselves for this new onslaught that is necessary in order to achieve the things we need to achieve. And I will tell you that we will do it. We will do it even if we have to change, and the patients and families who changed medicine forever, to read the patients and families who are forever changing medicine. Now, I want to ask one thing. All of the members of the 2023 class of the Leadership Council, I want you to stand up if you would, please. And incidentally, this is an unusual class. This is the first time in history we've ever had a class with a member from every single chapter across the entire United States. All right, stay standing. No, stay standing. I've got a very important thing I have to do. All prior members of a Leadership Council class, please stand and join this group. I'm not done yet. Now then, all of the professional staff and executives of the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, I want you all to stand up as well. Molly and Laurent, I need you all to take the names of all the people who are seated. This is the leadership class of 2024. All of the new members are receiving right now a hand calligraphied certificate of their membership. They will receive a plaque on their way home. They will receive those from their executive director. Thank you ever so much. I enjoyed having a visit with you.
What did I tell you? Thank you so much, Mike. And now it is my honor to invite back our favorite doctor, Mike Boyle.
Well, thank you, Mike. I said buckle up yesterday. I probably should have said 2 seatbelts. Mike, thank you for inspiring us. And, we're looking forward to diving in together on phase 3. We'll continue to talk about that. And congratulations to everybody who's been, to Ella, to Bonnie, thank you. There's nothing like the CF community, the CF family, right? So hope you've enjoyed the morning, the science, the hot topic sessions. There's one more thing that I want to make sure that I'm basically particularly excited for, and that is we wanted to start a tradition of bringing back each year someone who's just had an incredible impact at the CF, in the CF story. And when we had that list, we said we were going to call it sort of CF Legends or whatever, and obviously right up at the top of that list is somebody I'm excited to introduce as our next speaker. And that is our longtime leader in the CF community, Dr. Preston Campbell. So, not yet, in a second. Preston, so I think this is perfect in some ways because Mike was talking about all the things that have been accomplished, and I hope that Preston's going to share really what it was like to make this amazing story happen, right? He's going to be sharing his experiences of working, how CF has evolved over the years. Just as you know, I think everybody knows it, but I'm going to make sure it came to so Preston served as president and CEO of the CF Foundation from 2015 through 2019. In his time as CEO and earlier as executive vice president for medical affairs, Preston was a leader and really oversaw a robust portfolio of path-breaking, collaborative drug discovery and development programs, right? Really have made the CF story possible. These programs resulted in the approval of 4 modulator treatments, things that have changed the lives of so many people, and of course, recently Trikafta. Before joining the foundation, Preston actually was a doc, right? And that he served as on the faculty at Vanderbilt University School of Medicine, where he was the director of the CF Center. But I think the most important thing is we talk all the time about the foundation about having a head and a heart. A head and a heart, a head that just brings the best science, the best strategy, whatever is needed to advance our mission, but also doing it with a heart of love, a heart of service, a heart of caring for individuals with CF and their families. And there's no better example of that than Dr. Preston Campbell. So Preston, will you come on up?
We are the champions, my friends, and we'll keep on fighting till the end. We are the champions, we are the champions.
It is so wonderful being back with you all. It really is. You are amazing and the envy of every disease community in the world. And I love coming back and seeing the difference that you're making. And I love seeing Mike and his role. Boy, what a great job he's doing, huh? And Mike Beatty, congratulations for last night and the well-deserved Dream Big Award. And as happy and glad as I am about that, I'm really kind of ticked off that I have to follow you as the next speaker. And Casey, I really couldn't start without saying that I speak for everyone here, including Cam McLeod, who weighs in, and many, many other people that we're so excited. I mean, it seems like it's right and meaningful that you're now our chairman of the board of the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation. So thank you so very much. So we're running a little over, so I will try to be fast, but I'm from the South, so that may not happen very well. But I was thrilled when I learned that this year's VLC had a theme of dreams, as we all share a dream to cure cystic fibrosis. So I thought that I would tell you about my story. It's going to dovetail with what Mike had to say pretty well, actually. and actually try to point out some lessons that I've learned along the way that hopefully will help you as you complete this journey to cure cystic fibrosis. And by the way, I have no doubt whatsoever that you will one day be able to say, we are done, because our dream is realized. So, all right, I'm gonna get over that. So, I'd like to set the stage by going back to something that Mike talked about, and that is I stand in awe today of the founders of the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation. In 1955, they started when there was absolutely nothing. There was no CF care, there was no CF medicines, there was no CF science, and worst of all, there was absolutely zero hope for anyone with cystic fibrosis. When dreaming big, which is for all of us in this room, seems like that it's gotten hard, I want you to think back about what they faced and what they were then able to accomplish. They saw opportunity in darkness, and then they created abundance out of scarcity. So remember that when things look hard. So the question is for us now is, how did I get involved in cystic fibrosis? So there'll be a little bit about me. I apologize for that. But 20-some years after the CF Foundation was started, I was a medical student at the University of Virginia in Charlottesville, and I was working in a camp for children with chronic medical problems, which included people with CF, because at the time we didn't realize that people with CF could transmit infections from one to another. In bunk 8 with me, there were several boys with CF, and so I was able to see firsthand how CF impacted their lives and how they had to deal with it. In addition to that, the CF Center Director in Charlottesville, Bob Selden, who's this wonderful person, would come to camp every day. I formed a bond with him, and he taught me a lot about CF, so that by the end of camp, I told my medical student colleagues there that, I think I'd like to focus on cystic fibrosis. And they looked at me and they said, that's not gonna work. There just aren't enough people with CF in the world to be able to focus on cystic fibrosis. And so I really didn't know what to do with that, but it didn't stop the dream at that time. So also in medical school, I had the opportunity to study in London, and there I met my wife. It took me a long time to close that deal, as you'll hear in a minute. I also had a good friend who was the chief resident in surgery who was very interested in Haiti, and he was planning on going back to Haiti to start a hospital. And we talked about doing something together, and then going back to the US for his practice and me as well. Now, I did my pediatric residency in Nashville at Vanderbilt. After 3 years, they asked me to stay an extra year as chief resident. During that extra year, I got engaged. And we decided to spend 2 years in Haiti to help with the hospital. We got married, we trained at the Liverpool School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, and then we left for Haiti. I worked on the pediatric program, which was non-existent, and my wife set up and helped develop the public health program in the northwest of Haiti. Now, you could argue that it was not a very smart professional move for me to move to Haiti, right? And what about taking a new wife to the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere right after you get married? What in the world was I thinking? I went from practicing in one of the best equipped medical systems in the world to one of the least equipped. And it wasn't easy, but I'm so glad that we did this for 2 reasons. One, the hospital is now a huge success, and it's completely run and funded by Haitians, so it's just serving an ongoing need for that desperate part of the world. And secondly, how Haiti does relate to my dream to cure cystic fibrosis, because my Haitian experience forced me to think very creatively when solving a problem, because you just don't have all the usual stuff. In fact, it seems like you have nothing. But when I started looking, there was always a way to make things work. We did amazing things there. And the habit of looking for abundance and apparent scarcity came in real handy when I ultimately joined the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, and we were trying to do big and bold things when we had very limited resources. So I spent 2 years in Haiti, and then I joined the Vanderbilt faculty, and very soon I had a decision to make about cystic fibrosis because when I arrived at Vanderbilt, I started a new clinic there for children with complex medical problems, and that became a roaring success. It was the fastest growing clinic in Vanderbilt, and it seemed like, boy, this is a good move to come back to Vanderbilt. And at that time, the long-term CF center director at Vanderbilt retired. There wasn't an obvious replacement, and Vanderbilt was actively recruiting a pediatric pulmonologist who should take this over when they arrived. I was the general pediatrician at the time. It didn't really make sense to take this on, only to lose it when a pulmonologist came. And they, after several people declined, they ultimately came to me and asked me if I would be willing to do it. And the experience that I'd had at Camp Holiday Trails and the dream that had started there came back to me. And so I followed my heart and I made what seemed like another bad professional decision. And I said yes. And I said yes because it was the right thing to do for those people with cystic fibrosis because they needed something that was worth their coming to clinic for. And so that decision, by the way, has changed everything for me. The CF program at Vanderbilt, when I took over, was not in good shape and only followed 30 patients. The first thing that I did was I went around the country to some of the best performing CF centers and basically figured out what they were doing to steal their ideas and bring them back to Vanderbilt. Bruce Marshall and Al Farah called that quality improvement. It's also called stealing. Armed with new ideas about best practices, I was able to build a really superb team. And this team was responsible for really creating a very special clinic there. So by the end of the first year, we had 60 patients. And by the time the pediatric pulmonologist came 3 years later, we had over 300 patients there. And so when the pulmonologist came, I thought my time was done with CF at Vanderbilt. And I had really fallen in love with CF. And by this time, I had dreams about curing CF at night. So there's no way I was going to step away from it. So I announced that I was going to leave Vanderbilt and I was going to go do a pediatric pulmonology fellowship somewhere else. Vanderbilt stepped in and said, hey, wait a minute. Why don't you think about this? Why don't you stay on faculty? You'll be the co-center director at the CF clinic, and we'll make sure that you get the best pediatric pulmonary training and give you all the time that you need to do that. And so I was able to follow my dream without delay, and it's one of the great blessings that I've had in my career. And if it's beginning to sound like I'm not too smart, and God has been looking after me for a long time, you're right, he's the hero of my story for sure. So at Vanderbilt, I learned so much for my patients and their families, and watching these families battle CF day in and day out, I learned you can never quit. And I asked a dad about this one day, and he just simply said, look, Preston, life is not for sissies. And for us, if we dream big, we can't slow down, we cannot stop if things are not going the way we want. Dreaming big is not for sissies. And one of my more, shall I say, creative patients, her name was Candy, taught me something that about asking. And I'll just have to tell you up front that Candy was very full of life. I'll give you 3 examples of that. The last one is about asking. One day I got on the elevator to go in the hospital to go upstairs. And there in a wheelchair, sitting next to the buttons to push to go to the various floors with Candy in a wheelchair, as I said, with her legs pulled up underneath her, with a blanket over her legs, so she looked like a double amputee, right? And as people got on, she said, what floor would you like, please? And so she would punch in the floor, and by the time I got on, she had over $20 in tips on her lap. So another time that is equally as amazing is that I walked into her room one afternoon for rounds and to check on her and see how she's doing, and there sitting next to her bed, holding her hand, was the governor of Tennessee, Ned McWhirter. The governor was in there holding her hand. And I kind of quickly sort of shuffled out and went back to the nursing station and said, what's going on? Why is the governor in with Candy? She says, well, Candy called the governor's office and said she's dying And her last wish was for the governor to come and hold her hand and speak to her. Well, Candy was there for a routine pulmonary tune-up and lived many years after that, right? So here's the last thing for Candy that I want you to take home, and that is one Sunday morning on rounds, I walked into her room, and on the floor was all this stuff, just amazing stuff on the floor. There was a leftover lobster menu from an exclusive OB menu that she had no way of having access to, but there it was. You know, there were bags from San Antonio Taco, Trinity Place down the street, that littered the wall. And then there's this big chocolate cake from downstairs in the kitchen. So I looked at Candy and I said, Candy, no one else gets this stuff. Why do you get it? And she said, no one else asks. Okay? So that's a lesson for us. Sometimes we need help from other people and we need to ask. Now, I was soon asked to join the CF Foundation Center Care Committee, and ultimately that led to Bob Bell, the president and CEO, talking to me about joining him at the foundation. And realistically, that was probably another bad career move, to leave Vanderbilt in what was already a very successful role there and take on a relatively unknown position at the CF Foundation. And it was a hard decision, but the dream for curing CF and knowing that I could leverage my efforts won out. And so ultimately I said yes and agreed to join the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation. On a recruiting trip before I said yes, Bob Bell was asked me to his lake house in Western Maryland because he knew that I loved fly fishing. He thought it would be great if we could go fly fishing together. And so we got to the river and I started my routine of sort of looking at the water, right? And so normally you try to figure out what insects are on the water, what the fish are doing, how are they feeding, before you get in there and try to do things. And I'm doing this, Bob Bell jumps in the water and starts trying to herd fish up onto the bank. We were obviously very different people. But I'll tell you, that proved to be a good combination going forward, right? The board is amazing, and a former board member, Dick Danduran, had charged Bob Bell before I joined with taking more risks. And so Bob created the Therapeutics Development Program, which we call Venture Philanthropy today. CF drugs were being developed, Toby, Pulmozyme, but no one was focused on the basic defect, CFTR, although the science in that space was exploding and there was all this opportunity. The Therapeutics Development Program changed all of that. By the way, if you ever wondered how we got into high throughput screening, how did that happen? Bob got a throwaway farmer rag in the mail that had an article on high throughput screening that he read. And he thought, this sounds pretty cool, maybe we should do this. And that's what led to our high throughput screening efforts. The chances of success with the high throughput screening program are not that great. There's about a 1 in 1,000 chance to deliver an approved drug. Worse for us, no company had an already existing CFTR screen, so we were starting from scarcity. Most of our scientists, and I'm telling you, people like Bill Skach and other people thought we were crazy to be doing this. This was going to be expensive and more expensive than anything we'd ever done. We did not have the money in the bank, as we heard earlier. We were going to have to raise money in amounts we'd never raised before, so that there were lots of risk, but that did not change our approach. Bob and I asked a lot of companies to join us in this screening effort for cystic fibrosis, and literally almost all of them said no. Bob's famous Impatience, which was on full display on the river when he jumped in and started herding things, turned out to be pretty important because we were ultimately able to lure 7 programs into the field of cystic fibrosis. One of the companies we signed up was Aurora Biosciences in La Jolla, California, which was purchased by Vertex Pharmaceuticals. So Aurora Vertex originally received a small amount from us, $500,000. That quickly increased to $75 million, but we still we needed more money. So who could help us raise such a large amount of money? Well, the answer, as you know, is in this room, Joe O'Donnell. Joe initially wanted to raise about $150 million, but every time we turned around, that number seemed to grow somehow, and someone was calling Joe to say, look, we're going to need to up it. So I think he raised about $300 million or more before we were finished. Like my patient Candy, Joe was not afraid to ask, and we all can learn from that. Joe, you're amazing. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Now, I talked about risks. 6 of the 7 high-throughput screening programs failed, and we were now very aware of the risks. 6 of the 7. And what do you do when it looks like your dream may be stalling? You keep going. Vertex was the only program still standing, and fortunately, after several years of screening in one of our quarterly in-person meetings in La Jolla, we saw data that looked promising for the first time. A compound that formed the starting point for ivacaftor Kalydeco had a small signal telling us that something was working on CFTR. It really wasn't much at first, but it was the beginning. This compound had to be modified so it would be much more efficacious, and had to go through many screens to make sure that it was going to be safe going into man. And even after ivacaftor Kalydeco was created and it successfully passed all of those tests and looked like a good drug, guess what? We had to convince Vertex to develop it. Why? Because they were concerned about the size of the population and believed it wasn't worth it to move it forward. All I got to say is I bet they're glad now they did. Not long after that decision, ivacaftor Kalydeco clinical trials started, and when I saw the huge drop in sweat chloride levels in patients with cystic fibrosis on this drug, I cried because I knew this was a game changer and this was going to change everything in cystic fibrosis. Ivacaftor was approved in 2012, and the value of highly effective modulators was immediately apparent. The lives of people with CF who had a responsive mutation were telling us these incredible stories. Fortunately, the dream continued, and in 2016, Orkambi was approved. Orkambi hit a larger portion of the population, but it wasn't as effective as ivacaftor Kalydeco and G551D. Fortunately, we knew from academia already that a second corrector added to Orkambi would change that drastically. And we were already well underway with the next generation screening program. So Vertex was successful again in October 2019. As I was winding down my time as president and CEO, a bunch of people jumped into my office to bring the good news that Trikafta had just been unexpectedly approved. We weren't expecting it. This was months earlier than we thought, and was right before our North American meeting in Nashville the next month. Now, 94% of people would have access to highly effective modulators. I was back in Nashville, Vanderbilt's hometown, for our meeting to celebrate this important milestone. The dream was starting to come true. I stepped down on the 1st of 2020, January 1st, 2020, feeling good about the amazing team in place and already knowing that Mike is a great leader. Didn't know that COVID was lurking around the corner. But it's a testimony to the team, and I mean the whole team and you all, that so much progress has been made over such a very difficult and trying time. This morning's medical update is just one example of this stunning progress. So much progress. I think you should give that team a hand because what they're doing is amazing. Now, as I end, I don't have to tell you that we're not done. We've come a long ways, but we just aren't done until everybody has a modulator or some sort of CFTR effective therapy. We need to stay strong, as dreaming is not for sissies. We need to take big risks and anticipate failures like we've had along the way. We need to work together as we're stronger together. In fact, I think we need to go back and get some of the people that have kind of stepped aside after Trikafta and try to bring them back into this amazing story. In times of apparent scarcity, we need to be creative. We need to find abundance that is really almost always there. Finally, we need to feel empowered to ask for whatever is needed for us to reach our dream. You will succeed. CF is already the most amazing story in medicine today. You have the best leaders, the best team, the best community, the best industry partners. And science is creating amazing new opportunities every single day. You are also, without a doubt, the best community in the world. Now, what does that dream look like? Well, it certainly means no one left behind, 100%. That dream, I hope, also means that no complication will be without treatments. I hope that dream ultimately means that people with CF, wherever they are in the world, will benefit from all the hard work that you're doing here today. I also believe that one day that dream will mean people can say, I used to have CF, because I believe the delivery pieces and the other pieces are going to be solved in time. It's going to take time. It's going to take time, and we need to keep daydreaming, but I have no doubt that you will be successful. And when you are, all I ask is that you invite me to the party. Thank you.